and Inequalities in Context. In this post-lunch session, we will be having a very interesting panel discussion. And the topic is broadcasting, accessibility, and inclusive media practices. For this session, we have three very distinguished speakers among us. Let me call them on stage one by one. First, I would like to call Mr. Abhijit Dasgupta, former station director, Doordarshan, and renowned documentary filmmaker. Mr. Abhijit Dasgupta, if you can come on stage, please. Dr. Snehashi Shur, President, Press Club, Kolkata, Professor of Practice, St. Xavier's College, Kolkata. And also Dr. Abhijit Roy, Professor, Jadavpur University, Department of Film Studies. And to moderate the session, I would like to call upon Professor Dr. Minal Parekh, our Dean, to come on stage. First, let me give a small introduction of the very distinguished personalities who are on stage. Dr. Snehashi Shur. Dr. Snehashi Shur is a distinguished journalist, media academic, and former Additional Director General of Doordarshan. Currently, he is serving as Professor of Practice at St. Xavier's College, Kolkata. He is also the President of the Press Club, Kolkata. A PhD in journalism from the University of Kolkata, he has contributed extensively to media education as a guest faculty member, board member, and international trainer, including assignments with the Asia Pacific Broadcasting Union and Keio University, Japan. Recipient of several prestigious awards, including the M.V. Kamath Memorial Award, Dr. Shur has authored books, presented scholarly papers, and covered major national and international events throughout his career. And not only that, I will add one line to that. Snehashi was our professor in the university. So I would ask our students to come with the felicitation kits. Dr. Minal Parekh will felicitate Dr. Snehashi Shur. We have with us Mr. Abhijit Dasgupta, who is a veteran journalist, former Doordarshan station director, and acclaimed documentary filmmaker whose career spans more than 6 decades. Beginning his journalistic journey with The Statesman in 1963, he has built a reputation for fearless reporting, intellectual independence, and an enduring passion for storytelling. His assignments have taken him to over 100 countries, including rare experiences such as flying abroad Air Force One and reporting from remote regions across the globe. Known for his candid observations and adventurous spirit, Mr. Dasgupta remains actively engaged in journalism, inspiring generations with his commitment to truth, curiosity, and public service. And also once, I want to add one more line. Mr. Abhijit Dasgupta was my guru in journalism. Whatever little I have learned learned in television journalism, I have learned from Abhijit Da and Snehashi Da. So two of my gurus are here today. And to felicitate Mr. Abhijit Dasgupta, I am privileged to call BP Sanjay sir on stage to felicitate Mr. Abhijit Dasgupta. I would request Sanjay sir to stay on stage to felicitate Dr. Abhijit Roy also. Let me introduce Dr. Abhijit Roy. He is the professor of film studies at Jadavpur University, station director of community radio Jadavpur University, and former director of the School of Media, Communication and Culture. A leading scholar of media, culture, and politics in South Asia, he has held prestigious fellowships in France, the United States, Taiwan, and India. He is the founder chair of the Center for Research in Policy, Communication, and Society, and serves on the editorial boards of the several international journals. Author and editor of influential books and research publications, Dr. Roy's current work focuses on digital labor, media publics, television culture, and communication in contemporary South Asia. Thank you, Sanjay sir, so much. So we have a very distinguished panel, and now over to Dr. Minal Parekh to conduct the panel.
Thank you so much. Just to inform that the scholars who want to see this panel live, it is available live on ICA pages. So who are missing physically right now can watch this. Also, we've put this facility in each classroom where they're going to present the paper so that they can see the panel there. Since the inaugural session took a little more time, we had to start the technical session because there are some scholars who are coming from far off places. So thank you so much, sir. This topic was decided few days back because we thought that since we are all from media and of course under the mentorship of Snehashi sir, with the time, with my little experience that I've had in media, I think regulation is something which we need to talk presently a lot. It's a very delicate term. I don't want to talk much about it right now. But then listening from all three dignitaries here would be our pleasure. So I would start with Snehashi sir, please.
Hello. Thank you very much, Minal ma'am. Distinguished panelists, Professor BP Sanjay, Professor Minal Chatterjee, respected dignitaries, scholars, my dear students, and Shoykot, the MC. Shoykot was mentioning about his gurus and teachers. The two sitting in the panel happened to be my teachers too. One who taught me in my initial days in my induction program in Doordarshan and Film and Television Institute of India. And the other has been the examiner in one of my major examinations, which finally I got through. So my respect to two of my gurus. And third is Minal, and I must congratulate Minal and his team and the Honorable Chancellor and all others for agreeing to host it, this prestigious ICA hub in Kolkata. For the East, this is a great prize for all of us. You know the ICA chair for India, Professor BP Sanjay, who is the Dronacharya of media education. Sir is instrumental in having this session. That if we talk about inequality in media, we must talk about its recourse, and which I think is public service broadcasting. Can we have the slide, please? Can we have the PPT? Thank you. So that is why, thank you, sir, that in this such a huge conference, not only that how many are here in this hall, but it's being streamed live and it is going to remain in the repository of this hub, that we have discussed a concept like public service broadcasting in terms of discussing the inequality in media. In the inaugural session, we have had an elaborate discussion by the technocrats and the social scientists, the honorable vice chancellors who spoke eloquently on the inequality in media, which is concern for the inequality in our society. But a conference has to come out with a policy prescription, with a result. And I believe the public service broadcasting is one of the refuge and which can be made contemporary, which will continue to give a refuge to bridge inequality. And that's why we have chosen this. Why we call it that public service broadcasting is important in accessibility and inclusivity. Accessibility and inclusivity are two major parameters which qualify whether the media is a public service broadcaster. Ladies and gentlemen, unless and until my citizen can access, and unless and until the citizen of a remotely situated group, not only geographically, but a marginalized, downtrodden, qualitative, quantitative group, the voice is heard, it cannot be an inclusive media. And in a true democracy, a media can only be inclusive and which is accessible, and where a poorest of the poor or a remotest of the remote or marginalized will find his own position. And that is why we can say the inequality is breached. It is the broadcasting and the type of broadcasting that best promotes accessibility and inclusivity is generally public service broadcasting. The result and the answer is public service broadcasting. Combined with universal design principle, which means the design is accessible to all. We do not design in such a manner that many people cannot access. Without adoption, without any additional knowledge, skill, the technology directly comes and the content directly comes. And in the digital landscape, it is also accessible. Accessibility in digital, we have spoken on digital divide. So accessibility in terms of content, in terms of carriage, in terms of technology. And the solution where all can access and everybody is represented is public service broadcasting. And ladies and gentlemen, in the transformation, the public service broadcasting is moving towards public service media because of its presence in online media. So PSB has become PSM, which is contemporary, and it has to remain contemporary. You see, public service broadcasting has become public service media. Public service broadcasting is radio, television primarily because broadcasting. Public service media in social and online media. Both give inclusivity and acceptability. And it is to be relevant, it is to remain relevant. Unless and until it remains relevant, nobody will watch. And unless and until people watch, see, you give them acceptability, you bring them, but if they do not watch, there is no point of creating this. And public service media, the main thing is, if a person as a citizen is unable to access in a given point in time, where broadcasting makes the broadcast, maybe 7 o'clock in the evening, he's busy, it remains in the repository of the online system, in the digital landscape, that any time later, like this session, anybody can access. So the main factors of PSB and PSM are inclusivity and accessibility, and so that it reaches public and public reaches this media. These two things are very important to bridge the gap of inequality. See, for any academic discussion, we have to deal with the definition. I do not want to speak much on the definition of public service media. PSM refers to media organization and communication platforms that are established to serve public interest rather than commercial or political interest. And we all know that it does not cater to the commercial persons and the viewers and all. It caters to citizens. It's not that who could pay and who have paid and who have access. No, it caters to citizens. And the shift from PSB to PSM, which I was referring to remain relevant, the public service broadcasting has shifted itself to public service media by virtue of its presence in the digital landscape. There are certain mandates and characteristics of public service broadcasting or public service media, you can say, and which is important to bridge inequality. The entire discourse is relevant or centered around the accessibility and, it's equal inequality, to bridge the inequality and accessibility. Universal availability, universal accessibility, universal representation. And in a country like India, which is vast and which has got religious, linguistic, cultural, ethnic, all kinds of groups and subgroups. So each group needs to be represented. Universal participation, that their voice are heard. Universal access to information to diverse communities in their own languages, equal participation, and languages I have referred to. So these are the mandates and characteristics, and public service broadcasting is supposed to cater to all these. And I believe primarily there might have been deviations on their political bias or non-neutrality, but these are the ones which still the public service broadcasting is following, that availability, acceptability, universality, etc. There are, in other point of term, there are accessibility and inclusivity, like closed captions and subtitles which enables the deaf to understand, specially abled persons to access. Sign languages, similarly, the specially abled persons can accept. Audio description is over and above. If the visual is not understandable in your own language, it can be explained. Multi-language broadcasting, community broadcasting, and digital and online broadcasting. There are certain benefits which are conducive towards these features of accessibility and inclusivity in terms of digital landscape. And if we have a comparative analysis, the broadcasting type and how accessible and inclusive they are, PSB is high accessibility, inclusivity is very high, community broadcasting is high and very high, commercial broadcasting moderate and low, because unless and until you pay, you cannot watch. And those programs are telecasts which have got a viewership and commercially successful, which is not supposed to be given. There are certain public service messages important, they are not bound to give that, whereas a PSB is supposed to give that. So they have moderate and low inclusivity. Digital and OTT is also moderate. Again, if you have the connectivity or subscription, then only you can access. So PSB is high and very high. So in terms of accessibility and inclusivity, this is the public service broadcasting. If a seminar has to discuss on the bridge of inequality of media, inequality through media, I think the public service broadcasting is still the answer, and we have to find out how public service broadcasting can be run as a relevant to the present digital ecosystem. We can do everything, but unless and until we can attract our viewers, you cannot force the viewers to watch. So that is also very important. In one way, we have to fulfill the mandates, but on the other side, we have to continue to make it attractive, technically, content-wise, content and carriage both, content and format both, including the carriage. Carriage will give accessibility, content will give availability and inclusivity, and it is the attractive programs that should attract and make the viewers watch, make the citizens watch. Because Many of the citizens have the options of private media, so it's my responsibility in PSB to catch hold of the my citizens to continue with PSB. So it's both sides. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. You know, we are a broadcaster, so we are concerned about time limit, and two other veterans also will have to speak. So I did not like to elaborate. Thank you very much. Please change the slide.
Thank you so much, sir. Next, I would request Abhijit, sir, to please. Yeah. Abhijit Roy, sir.
Thank you, Minal ma'am, the chair of this session, and the distinguished panelists, co-panelists that you have on stage, Mr. Abhijit Dasgupta and Dr. Snehashi Shur. I mean, they're much more knowledgeable than me, and they have much more of experience and knowledge about this, I'm sure. And I'm the one who actually looks at all these issues from an academic perspective, not as much from a practitioner's perspective. I mean, they have been on both sides of the stream, you know, both into understanding theorization and into practice. So, of course, I mean, their submission would be more perceptive. The distinguished guests that you have, Professor B.P. Sanjay, Professor Minal Chatterjee, my distinguished colleagues in SNU, and dear students. Since I have, and I mean, each of us have a very little time, maybe from 7 to 8 minutes, and it has to be within 10 minutes. I cannot give you a very, you know, kind of a extensive survey of issues in accessibility and inequality in the field of broadcasting. But what I can do is that I can give you sort of two examples, which I think would be somehow the entry points through which you could think of the larger issues. So because in this very short premise of time, I can't do justice to more. So that is what I would try to do. And I'm very thankful to Snehashista, because he has actually made my job easier by referring to the worth of public service broadcasting, because I'm on the same page, and you know, the way I'm going to speak possibly speaks volume of you know, the worth of the public service broadcasting. First of all, a disclaimer: I like to stick to the term disability because I voice the concerns, the interests of disability rights activists who like to call themselves as disability rights activists, and are not called the people with disability with special needs and Divyang. And so that's a different kind of a discourse. So I'll stick to that kind of term. Yes, of course, accessibility, I mean, if you look into the internet, if you look into the discourses, if you look into the debates, you would see that it concerns a lot, you know, the issues in disability, the issues concerning people who, if you like, are specially abled, people who are disabled. And I want to refer to you know, and Snehashista has already made my job easier by referring to closed captions and audio stories and all other aspects, which in fact are reflected in the UNESCO guidelines on accessibility in broadcasting media as well. I want to very quickly, maybe in 5 minutes' time, refer to the very localized history of India, in which we have witnessed that how public service broadcasting addressed these issues, you know, from particularly the late 80s and early 90s. And of course, we are aware of the contemporary developments, you know, the accessibility standards for persons with disabilities in television programs, I mean, that have come out from the Ministry of Information Broadcasting in 2019, and which, of course, wants also the private networks to implement, but we have unfortunately witnessed that the private networks have not been able to or not been willing to introduce those, implement those to the extent which curiously the public service broadcasting sector had actually implemented long before. And this is something that I want to foreground as a kind of point. Generally speaking, also Akashvani currently broadcasts 23 languages, 179 dialects, and these are all inclusivity issues. There's no doubt about that. And some regional stations, you would be amazed that, for instance, Akashvani Itanagar, for instance, air news in 11 local tribal dialects to ensure localized accessibility. And Braille innovation, for instance, and something that empowers visually impaired broadcasters at regional branches have been pioneered by Akashvani, for instance. And Akashvani Gangtok, has this very interesting case of a visually impaired anchors reading live news bulletins using Nepali Braille scripts. And this is something which is also another part of the UNESCO guidelines on accessibility, in which they say that you have to include more and more people into the management, from marginalized groups, from people who are not able, but from people from various marginalized groups in terms of religious caste and creed and etc. And there have been also News on Air app and other apps that the public service broadcasters use in India, in which you have the screen reader compatibility standards, you have the text transcripts, you have this policy of while a particular program is being transmitted through a web platform, for instance, News on Air, you would see that making a thumbnail has now become mandatory. And sometimes you also have the captions coming in. Sometimes you have what is being read is also being produced as the same language translation, same language subtitle. So that's very important. So this is something that we need to keep in mind, and I'm kind of echoing Sneha's this point, that how public service broadcasting has been kind of a pioneer when it comes to include the concerns of the disabled within the broadcasting practices. Doordarshan in the 1990s introduced its first weekly news bulletin in sign language, and that was a weekly one, but in 2002, it launched India's first daily Indian Sign Language, or ISL, news bulletin, for instance. I mean, the national events, you would still see that, there are also parallel sign language interpretations that are carried out in case of Independence Day or Republic Day or Prime Minister's speech from Red Fort. It's only lately that you see that, for instance, in the case of the last IPL, you would see that the sign language has come and seeped into a major live broadcast event for the first time in the private sector. So here we have a kind of a reverse sequence, contrary to popular perception, how the public service broadcasting has not only been a pioneer, but it has been kind of sticking to this whole project of universal broadcasting accessibility, something that the private sector actually is lagging behind. And this is a point in case, and this has to be understood and read in terms of the context of the renewal and resurgence of public service broadcasting all over the world. And I have two parts, but then the first part ends here. And since there are also students, I'll recommend that you read the 30 Ways Media Can Improve Accessibility, the UNESCO manual that is published in December 2025, and also Billion Readers 2025, a roadmap for accessible entertainment in India. And it's interesting that's in 1996, at IIM Ahmedabad, this actually started as the same language subtitling, or the SLS project, and which culminated into what is now known as the BIRD, the Billion Readers project, where you have something that is being aired, but you have the same language subtitles appearing. Okay, so there are many ways by which you can actually, broadcasting can stick to this whole ethos of universal accessibility, something which I suppose I have kind of made as a point. Anyway, so India, of course, many of us haven't kept news, but This has been done by the government, for instance, in 2024. You have the Nivedita channel, which is the first all ISL, all Indian Sign Language educational channel. So these are kind of inroads that are being made and pioneered and stuck to by the public service broadcasting. So we should be proud of that as a kind of a continuation of that project that started in the 1990s. And this is something I thought that the young students should pay attention to. I'll just give a second instance of accessibility, which is not concerned with the issues in disability and accessibility and therefore inclusivity. But I would draw your attention to a certain moment in the history of broadcasting in which we actually transitioned from the analog era to the digital era through the digital addressable system, right? And something which started from in 2012 and then ended in 2017, through set-top boxes, and something that we all are aware of, the digital addressable systems. Of course, I mean, there is an early history to it. In 2003, we had the direct-to-home and the experimentally practiced conditional access system, but I'm not bringing all those here. What I'm concerned about is a kind of a mass transition of television systems from the analog to the digital through the set-top box. I'll just give you one example, and it's going to be a critique of the private sector once again, not generally a critique of the private sector, the way they have actually, the things they promised but couldn't deliver through the digital addressable system. And here again, we'll see that the kind of accessibility that you promise, we have not been able to achieve. What is that? There were two industry / the government logics, throughout 2010, 2011, and 2012 through the 4 phases until 2017, we have now been able to complete this whole project of digitalization. Is that there was a cable operator, and the cable operator would take, would send, take the cable to your homes, and through that kind of an infrastructure, you'd be able to watch all kinds of channels, right? I mean, in our analog era, everything was kind of free to air from that perspective, right? So they said that why you are actually paying much more? Why you should pay more? You should be paying for only those channels that you would watch, right? So it's a kind of an a la carte model of exhibition and watching. So when you have the set-top box, when you have the digitalized system, what you can do is that you can actually choose and pick only those channels for which you would be paying. So that was the first major logic, right? The second major logic was very interesting, and something that we haven't kept track of, is that they said that our model of broadcasting is advertising driven. And that's the reason why our news media, that's the reason broadly our media, and not only news media, but also fiction, everything is so biased. We need to move towards a subscription-based model. We wouldn't depend as much on advertising. And therefore, you would see that media would become more unbiased. If you actually look into the discourses of 2010 through to 2012, you'll see that these are the two major logics that were provided by the media industry and primarily the media industry and the government for legitimizing this system of digitalization, right? The first is more choice, more access or choiceable access. The second was unbiased content. But all of us know the real reason was that cable operators were allegedly under-declaring number of connections, right? And there was no transparency, allegedly. So you had to put in set-top boxes so that you could actually see how many connections are being given by cable operators, so that there is no seepage and slippage from the revenue which was supposed to be raised by the multi-system operators, which in turn feeds the channels, right? Because in India, we have the pro-tier broadcasting system, the channel, the multi-system operator, the cable operator, and then the consumer. After the digitalization was accomplished with much more of a fanfare and so much of promise around accessibility, what has happened? Let us start from the petty thing. You would see that the amount that you used to pay monthly has now kind of sort of surged quite a lot, considerably. The monthly cost has increased. With what happened is the number of channels that you get to watch has decreased. If you want to go for a larger bouquet, you will have to pay more and more. What was promised as pay per channel, along with, of course, the free-to-air channels, now has been turned to a bouquet system, which was absolutely illegal, and something that was challenged in the court as well, but something which could not be sustained. But anyway, so you can't see that in addition to the free-to-air channels, I'll just watch one channel, and can I buy that by 10 rupees? No, you can't. Something that was promised, and it almost sounded like that kind of a fair business, but it never turned out to be that. But anyway, so that's number one, which is what? Which says that this is a major factor hampering inclusivity. The people who have more money would have access to more number of channels, as simple as that. We have actually entered into that kind of an era, which it was not. Secondly, what I call a tele-neutrality. You must have heard of net neutrality, the famous 2015 movement in which Facebook brought in these free basics. And there's a huge movement, pan-Indian and across the world, trying to resist that. They were trying to suggest that some websites would be available free, and for some websites you'll have to pay. That kind of a system was resisted, but we have been able to keep alive net neutrality now, right? But something that you couldn't sustain in case of television. So in that sense, not all channels are available, but only few channels are available to you, and fewer if you pay less and more if you pay more, that kind of a system in which what has happened is that what I now call tele-neutrality as opposed to net neutrality, has been hampered. I'll just give you one funny example. You can say that, the industry can tell you that, okay, you don't understand Tamil, you don't understand Telugu, Malayalam, Kannada, Bhojpuri, or whatever, but all those channels are being fed to you, right? And what's the point? Now, the audience has a point. Okay, I am a Bengali, I watch Bengali channels, Hindi channels, English channels, but it is fantastic to actually log on to the spaces and times, even if I don't understand the language, of those channels of which I do not understand the language, and go to such diverse places. It's kind of a travel, that was possible, even without understanding the language, even possibly the sonic quality of the language of let a Tamil language going into the ears of a Manipuri, and a Manipuri language going into the ears of the Kashmiri in that kind of regime was actually a fantastic system, and now you cannot do that. In the name of choice, what has happened is a kind of a violation of the very, very foundational ethos of tele-neutrality. The third point, something which was also a promise has now been violated, is people have written a lot about this and keep writing about this, the issue of surveillance and the issue of data privacy, something that has also seeped into a much intensified avatar now, and with much more of a sort of systematic manner than it was before. And above all, and that's the last point with which I want to end, what do you think? A subscription-driven model is now in place, and something that was promised by the industry, that all biases would be removed. Biases have been removed from news media. What do you think? Many people actually believe that over the last few years, the media bias has increased to a great extent. People also, give ascriptions to the media, which I do not want to repeat here. But you know how media is called with a certain kind of a prefix, right? So bias has not disappeared because of our transition to the digitalized system, something that was promised, right? In fact, many people believe that over the last few years, dependence on advertisement, corporate intervention, and broadly concentration of media ownership in a few corporate bodies have all increased, and leading to, it has been suggested, unprecedented media bias, okay? So once again, possibly what brings all of us back to is the worth of the public service broadcasting. Think of an NHK, think of a CBS, and let us try and turn the public service broadcasting network with all its rich content, many of which are still adorable and something to be proud of, but to make it more unbiased, more inclusive. I've just given you two examples. And in both of these examples, what I've tried to tell you and sort of drive home the point is that the public service broadcasting has been actually, to a large extent, at least for the first on the first occasion, been much more ahead and has pioneered inclusivity and accessibility issues. In case of the second, of course, I'm including all of the media, but all the promises that were made before digitalization, in terms of access, in terms of inclusivity, has been very grossly defeated, unfortunately, and we have to work towards that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Requesting Abhijit Dasgupta, sir, to please start with your lecture.
Namaskar. There are two key words today: accessibility and inclusivity. What is accessibility? What does it mean? From the viewer's point of view, do I have access to see what is being shown? From the broadcaster's point of view, do I have access to the viewers? It's a two-way traffic. Inclusivity is also a two-way traffic. Statistically, I could speak on this topic for 2.5 days non-stop. But how many would listen to me? None. The impact will be zero. We in India, we have had public broadcasting. No one watches. With full honesty, with noble intentions, we do a lot of things, but we don't care about the impact of it. Now, let me share a few of my experiences. You see, in this media world, as of today, at least in this part of India, I am perhaps the oldest and still practicing journalist. I joined Statesman in 1963, much before many of you were born. In communication, there must be something common. It's a two-way traffic. Inclusivity and accessibility are also two-way. It's not a one-way. Statistically, I might be doing programs. It could be an agricultural program. I'll give you an example. Say, for instance, you get experts in the studio, and your target viewers would be farmers in the field. And the experts say, your field has fertigation as osmotic stress. Who would understand that? Fertigation and osmotic state. He's an expert, he's a scientist. You have done your job, you brought the best man into the studio, air-conditioned studio. Your target is to reach the public, that's the farmer. He doesn't understand what he's talking about and what he's hearing. What's the point? Statistically, you have achieved something. In effect, you have achieved zero. The simple thing is, your soil cannot retain the fertilizer. Use fertilizer, minimum fertilizer, but repeat it often. That's the language. When I joined Aaj Tak, it was Aaj Tak and NDTV, both the beginnings of their journey. I started a thing called Kaizen. Kaizen is a Japanese thing where everyone participates, right from the peon to the head. Everyone participates. And during one of the elections, I remember I had conducted a workshop in which I had said very clearly that right from Mr. Arun Puri, G. Krishnan, to everyone down below has to participate. Only then I will conduct the workshop, otherwise forget about me. The reason was there. The reason is you have to have a team. And what is a team? In a football field, you have a team. You have 11 players, there's a captain, sure enough. You have a goalkeeper. Each has his own job. You have a defense, you have the offense, you have a striker. But it is a team that plays together, going out and playing in the dust, in the rain, in the heat. You cannot be reaching your target audience unless you reach them. If mountain doesn't come to Muhammad, Muhammad has to go to mountain. It's as simple as that. Please don't expect viewers to come to you. Why should viewers come to you? Why should they watch? There are no reasons to watch. Their time is valuable unless you create a content that will interest them. No point giving lectures. Unless you can create interest, generate curiosity, unless they come on their own, you can never ever reach your target audience. Never. It will be a statistical exercise, ultimately resulting in a big zero. As I said, I'm not an academician. I don't have a PhD. But I have, a zero after. I'm only 8 years old with a zero. And zero has a value. A zero after 1 is 10. A zero after 10 is 100. A zero after 1,000. A zero after 10,000. So that's a zero. The point is, you have to share experience. Learning, public service broadcasting, reaching out to the target audience, all that is only possible if the content that you create is interesting enough. Otherwise, it will just be an exercise in utter futility. Students who come out of various institutes in India, I'm standing here at the Sister Nivedita University. I'll tell you an example. I'm sorry to be saying this. I was Dean of SRFTI. I asked students if they had heard of Sister Nivedita. Only one hand went up. I asked them if they heard of Swami Vivekananda. They said he was a monk. I wonder how many students of this university would know the contribution of Sister Nivedita in creating ICAR. I don't think they know. I don't think they know. They've heard of Boshistar Sen. The point is, whatever information is available at Dr. Google's university or ChatGPT or what have you, or Venus AI or what have you, we don't need to talk about it. We don't need to teach that. The role of a teacher is that of a guide, not to teach. I'll tell the students, if you want this, go to that page, you will find it, full stop. During exams, I would allow the smartphone. I would allow the smartphone. And let's see if they can do it. The point is, we have examples, yet we close our eyes. There is an organization which we are blissfully unaware of. It's International Public Television, INPUT. It's the biggest public service television organization in the world. Every year we have a conference in different country. Now, if anyone is keen on seeing what would interest the audience, why people attend input? To steal ideas, quote unquote. I would request Minal, the Dean, if you can organize a mini input here, instead of giving lectures for 3 hours, watching a 3-minute film, they will understand it much better. And I can give you example. Communication is not easy in India. Every 150 kilometers, the dialect changes. The language is different. The culture is different. But there is a solution. Why aren't we talking about that? And that solution is, and there is an example, is a no language communication. How many of you have seen Pushpak, the film? There's no language in it. There's no language, yet it was the most commercially relevant film of the year, and it won the national award. There's no language in it. There are huge demands for no language programs throughout the world. Every country wants it. Television is a hungry giant. It eats up everything very, very fast. So there's a dearth of software. Yet, students from media institutes, even from SRFT, call me, sir, can I get a job? What job? Can't you produce something yourself and sell it? No, sir, if I can get something. That attitude has to change. Please understand this. Public service broadcasting can bring in a change that no one can ever dream of. But that change cannot be just statistics. It has to have the right kind of impact. Thank you very much.
Totally agree with you. I'll just take 2 minutes, sir. I did not say anything within this because I thought that it's better that students listen to you. Sir, I also go back to the journey where I joined Aaj Tak as a trainee. And the first thing that was told to us, our editor was Supriyo Prasad. So he told us, Minal, ये TV चल रहा है, mute कर दो और अब story बनाओ. So we were told to mute the stories and then create our news. So he said, language is not important, but the story is very important. So I really connect to that, sir, when you said that, there should be no language. So thank you so much for, I know the audience is there, sir. Please don't worry. They are watching live. I've communicated with... Yes. And yes, the scholars are there. I will just take a minute. I'm sure if anybody has any question, we can take 1 or 2 questions because we will not get this opportunity of having all 3 of them on stage. And Abhijit, sir, sitting in the center, sir, we have always, we looked up to you as students, as professionals. Though we've not crossed path much, but even in the industry, people talk about you even today, that the kind of person you have been in the industry. So anybody in the audience who wants to ask question? Anybody? 1 or 2 questions we can take. Sekat, sir? Sir? Sir, you... No. Sir, please go ahead.
This is an observation. This is an observation to Professor Abhijit Roy's very perceptive analysis on the contradictions in the public policy with regard to accessibility. Now, if I'm correct, the subscription model in any media, including newspaper, was supposed to overtake or obviate the free lunch syndrome that had caused them on over-dependence on advertising. And today you have hierarchical models where the more you pay, the less advertisement or no advertisement you can see. That's a new model, that is pay-per-view to subscription. Now, in passing, you mentioned that are they subscribing to bias-free content? But historically, sir, newspapers have never hid their bias to the perceptive reader. They've always taken a stand, isn't it? I mean, they're supposed to be objective, but their ideological underpinnings are very clear over different periods. So do you mean to suggest that am I subscribing to a media because my individual filters are salient with the content? Particularly in the Indian context, where I would read the Hindu not because of Hindu's objectivity, but also because of the ideological slant that I share with Hindu. So, is there a distinction, sir, between monetized subscription to ideological based subscription? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Sanjay. I think, the more basic distinction that we should make is between ideological preferences and objectivism. Of course, I can have my ideological preferences, but I can at the same time be objectivist. Now, this is very important. It's not as simple as kind of being biased and objective. So objectivism is crucial, and I can perfectly align to the value of objectivism with my ideological preferences. So I think one has to make this very subtle political philosophical distinction. Given that, what has happened? First of all, there is a disclaimer that you brought in the question of newspaper, but I was trying to stick to the broadcasting sector, which of course is television, and didn't bring in much of radio as well, but television particularly. So I think the situation is much more dismal in case of television when it comes to private television, not as much possibly in the newspaper. But generally, of course, if you look at the larger mediascape, one can really talk about it. I was talking about the subscription model with particular reference to what has happened from 2012 to 2017 in terms of the digital addressable system that has been brought in through the set-top box system. So I was particularly referring to that. But of course, when you bring in the question of newspapers, you have quite rightly complicated this position in which the newspapers, I would say, would be much more of a house which deliberately keeps various kinds of positions. So if you look at a TOI, if you look at an Indian Express, if you look at an Anand Bazar Patrika, what you'll find is that there are people, very much employee, journalists, who actually represent various positions. The one is at the far right, the one is at the far left, the one is a centrist and all kinds of things. So which is a newspaper, therefore, refers almost a kind of a microcosm of a nation. But in case of the television channels, it's more of kind of moderated and preferential territory is much more of an apparent. So from that perspective, I was speaking to. So thank you for bringing in this whole idea of, because I'm still one of those very, very few across this age and yours in which, we think that opening a newspaper and not actually watching it, reading it on the platform, but actually holding the page on hand is something which is of a completely different experiential regime than something which, a platform, algorithm-driven platform gives me. So I think, I mean, it's a very important question that you brought in terms of the very subtle difference that one has to make between. So historically, of course, there have been ideological preferences, which I won't call, which I wouldn't call a kind of a bias in the sense I'm now referring to the whole privately owned satellite television bandwagon as such. So I think that of course, one can go on and on, try to figure out what are the differences, but I'm sure that you understand, and we can deliberate on that. Thank you.
Another question from that end. Can you just hand over the mic?
Hello. So, sir, my question is to Abhijit Dasgupta, sir. Actually, my question is like this thing came to my mind when he was speaking about that how like something related to media. So the question is that nowadays we are very much exposed towards social media, and today's generation, like it is almost impossible for us to ignore the fact or live without using social media nowadays. So how can we like keep or maintain a certain balance for like making sure we are all still apart, we are still like in a like pretty much pressurized with our academics and stuff. So how can we like keep a balance and not get overexposed towards it?
You have to move with the time. Social media is something that you have to accept. So you have to reform. Why can't you include social media as a part of television? Why can't it be inclusive? There are examples of it. I'm sure you know about BBC4. What are they doing? The same broadcast for television, and the audio goes as radio. Television you don't describe. Television you hear through the eyes. In radio you see through the ears. Okay, how are they managing it? All that's possible. You see, God has given you something called brain. The problem is that 5-letter word in English, THINK, that we don't use. Think, and you'll find the answer. I was talking about input. I could show you, God knows, 200 programs where social media has been used as a part of television. You can do that. You have to accept, move with the time. And let me tell you something. Even at my age, I don't say I was right and you are wrong. I don't say that. Never. You would say the same thing to your granddaughter. We were much better. That's all rubbish. I don't believe in it. We need to evolve ourselves. We need to move with the time. Move with the time.
How to balance academics and
Academic, you see, let me tell you something. What is academics? You're talking about balancing. Academics gives you a certificate. How many organizations, tell me, how many organizations look at your certificate when they employ you? Zero. Zero. There is Shoykot. You know Shoykot? Here. 80 students, chosen students from Calcutta University journalism course were sent by Taputi. Only two got selected. I never saw their certificates. Even today, I don't know their qualifications. But I had given them a test and they passed. Only 2 passed. No, Suman. So it's something quite different. Academics gives you the base on which you stand. You need a base to stand, right? And then it's all up to you. You develop it. Don't, if you follow a book, then you'll be only repeating something. You have to create something new. Steve Jobs said something, think different. That's the word.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. But I would like to add to what sir has said, that we've seen past these years in academics that the good students are good in everything. They are good with their school skills also, they are good with their classes also, they are good with sports also, they are attentive also. So I think if you are disciplined, if your goal is clear, everything will be there. So thank you so much, sir, for being here. I would just request Sekat sir to arrange if we can have a group photograph at the end. Sir, Mrinal sir, Sanjay sir, please. Other faculty members, Jumur, Sanjay sir, please come up on stage. They want to be good at everything. Want to do something. Yes, absolutely.
That doesn't matter.
It's a skill-based knowledge that is very, very important.
এখন একটা পার্ট সোশ্যাল মিডিয়া
Start the last panel of the day. I request all the students and research scholars who are sitting behind, please, if you can come forward. Please sit in the front rows. Good evening, all. We are starting the last panel of the day. The topic is Power, Data, and Ethics toward Critical Methodologies in Digital Communication Research. We have a very distinguished panel to discuss this topic. We have Dr. Ekati George, PhD in Communication Studies, founding chair of ICA Nigeria, joining us online. Good evening, ma'am. Dr. Ekati George, a PhD in Communication Studies, founding chair of ICA, Nigeria. Ma'am, can you hear me? Please unmute yourself. Yes, good evening, ma'am.
The sound is not very clear, but I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, ma'am. Ma'am, please unmute yourself.
Okay, I've unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you, ma'am. Good evening.
I can hear you.
We also have with us in the panel Professor Burashiva Dasgupta, Advisor, Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, Sister Nivedita University. Sir, can we have you on stage, please? We have Professor Shubir Dhar, Professor, Department of English and Director, School of International Languages, Sister Nivedita University. Sir, can we have you on stage, please? And Professor Debanjan Banerjee, Dean, Media Science, Techno India Main Campus, Salt Lake. Professor Banerjee, we welcome you on stage. And the host of this program, the moderator is Dr. Jhumur Dattagupta, our dear colleague. Jhumur, can we have you on stage, please? Let me introduce our panelists first. Dr. Ekati George is a communication scholar, development communication practitioner, and founding chair of ICA Nigeria. Her research focuses on the intersections of health, gender, environment, and global development communication. A graduate of the University of Calabar and the University of Port Harcourt, she combines academic scholarship with extensive experience in the maritime and development sectors. An accomplished writer and literary activist, she is the author of Saints and Scoundrels, a collection addressing environmental degradation and gender injustice in Nigeria, Niger Delta. Dr. George is widely recognized for her leadership in communication studies, advocacy, and community engagement. Once again, we welcome Dr. George online. We have Professor Burashiva Dasgupta with us.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, welcome, ma'am. Professor Bhurashiva Dasgupta is a veteran journalist, media educator, author, and wildlife enthusiast with nearly 5 decades of experience in journalism and academia. He has worked with leading newspapers, including The Statesman, The Economic Times, and The Financial Express, and has headed media departments at several universities across India. A prolific writer and researcher, he has authored and edited books on media, society, and wildlife, published extensively in academic journals, and supervised doctoral research. He is the founding editor of Global Media Journal, India Edition, and Communication Online, and has delivered lectures across Asia, Africa, and the United States. And also to add one more line, Professor Dasgupta was our professor when we were master students in Calcutta University. Welcome, sir, on stage. And I also take this opportunity to call upon stage Dr. Sanjay Sengupta, Assistant Dean of our school, to felicitate Professor Bhurashiva Dasgupta. Students, can we have the felicitation kits? Sanjay sir, if you can stay back. We have also with us Professor Shubir Dhar, who is a distinguished scholar of English literature, cultural studies, and humanities. Formerly head of the Department of English and director of the School of Languages and Culture at Rabindra Bharati University, he also served as the university's officiating vice chancellor. Currently Dean of the School of Humanities, International Languages, and Social Sciences at Sister Nivedita University, he has conducted postdoctoral research at Cambridge University and presented papers at leading international institutions. Author of more than 12 books and numerous research articles, his work spans Shakespeare, Romanticism, Tagore, post-colonial literature, comics, and popular culture. He is the president of the Shakespeare Society of Eastern India. We welcome Professor Shubir Dhar on stage, and Sanjay sir will felicitate Shubir sir. Thank you, Sanjay sir. Thank you. We also have on stage Professor Debanjan Banerjee, who is the Dean of Media Science at Techno India Main Campus, Kolkata, and a renowned media educator, author, columnist, political analyst, and television commentator. With over 27 years of combined experience in academia and industry, he has taught media studies for more than 2 decades and serves as a visiting professor at the Satyajit Ray Film and Television Institute. A frequent commentator on national and international affairs across major television networks, he has presented research globally and contributed extensively to print and digital media. His recent work focuses on artificial intelligence, media policy, and South and Southeast Asian geopolitics. I would like to call upon Professor Arindam Basu on stage to felicitate Professor Debanjan Banerjee. Thank you, Arindam. Now I will hand it over to Jhumur ma'am to start the panel. Oh, before that, yes, of course, Jhumur is our colleague, but still, she is the moderator today, so we will felicitate Jhumur ma'am, and Arindam will felicitate Jhumur. Over to Professor Jumod Dattagupta.
Good evening, all. Good evening to all the dignitaries, distinguished guests, and eminent speakers, and research scholars, and all the guests who are present in this auditorium. We are going to start our last panel of this day. The title of our panel is Power, Data, and Ethics Towards Critical Methodologies in Digital Communication Research. We all know after the rapid growth of digital technology, the communication ecosystem, it has been changed. Digital communication is basically has given us more opportunity, but it also raises many concerns like the data manipulations, the platform manipulations, algorithm, and as well as the ethics and privacy, the privacy matter also. So today, we will discuss on these topic and on this point, and we have set the tone of our panel on this point. But first, I would request our distinguished guest and as well as the speaker, Professor Duroshiba Dasgupta, to deliver his thoughts regarding the political communications. We all know that few days back, we have observed in West Bengal the assembly election, and where all the political parties, to map the psyche of their voters, they have used the digital platform. And then when they have used the digital platform, how they have used the communication tools, how they actually manipulate the data, or maybe the data monetizations, everything we will discuss by using the CDA or the critical discourse analysis. Professor Dasgupta will actually clear his academic standpoint. Sir, I would request to deliver your speech.
Hello? Yeah. Thank you, Chumur. The topic is something which we really deal with almost everyday life today in communication, but I don't know whether we actually have framed it this way. So simply said, I mean, we can understand that today's media is everywhere in terms of new platforms. The traditional media is existing, but it has been, overlapped by things like the artificial intelligence and the digital algorithms. So these are the in our everyday word, we call it the buzzwords, or these are the items which attract the eyeballs. But possibly this is what engulfs all the media platforms today, the traditional media. Whether we are into the political field, whether you are in social discussions, whenever we talk about these areas, we bring in these ideas of AI and the digital algorithms. Now, what has happened is, initially, these seem to be a little technical, but over the period of time, this has become today a part of our life. And what happens is, I'll give some examples today, very, very topical, some examples which we are interacting almost at a daily level, to try to understand this particular idea of how these digital platforms are influencing our communication methods. But we have another tag here added, but whether these ideas can be put into a research framework, whether what kind of research framework, when we want to do it, maybe a serious study, what kind of research framework would we adopt to understand the present day digital digital platform or the AI platform. Now, the present day, whether it is the website, whether it is the social media, what happens is, as I said, our traditional media is not over, because all the biases that we have seen in the traditional media, taking sides, say in the television media or the newspapers, they are part of or spokesperson or platform of, say, either a political party or maybe, say a business house. So those biases, these prejudices, which we saw in the traditional media, are already into our, say, digital platforms, in our social media. So we are not above anything. We have brought those traditions into the present day, present day conversation, present day interaction. What has happened is we have added a few more tools or platforms to the older biases, what we have seen in the traditional media. What kind of things which we have added? We have added, say, new forms like the memes, the viral videos, the reels. These are the terms which we are familiar. Our younger students, they are more into these kind of, platforms. The threads, for example, or the hashtags, and of course the simple comments that we see in our X handle and say in the social in the Facebook. So these things are there, and other platforms are like the Twitter or the Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. These have what we have seen in their particular use. I'll give some examples of how these platforms have been used in, say, political platform, maybe in the US election, for example, or even today's, say, the just concluded 2026 election in West Bengal, how these platforms have been used, which shows how, and we are talking about, Jumur has said that we are talking about how power game is being performed. In fact, when we are tracing these platforms, these methods, we are definitely into the power game. We are trying to understand the power game, the political parties fighting it out. We also see how data is being manipulated in these campaigns that we see, whether it is the American president election or say in the Indian elections, and of course the manipulations and the kind of deep fake that we see, and fake is something which has become part of our daily conversation. That also raises a lot of, say, ethical questions in media today. So if we try to analyze a little bit, if we collect these, different use of these platforms for, say, political campaigns, what kind of methods or what kind of research methods can we use? Usually what we have seen is today, they have they usually adopt a term or a method called netnography. So which is nothing but studying the net, through the methods of, say, ethnography. It comes from anthropology, when we have used these methods, say, in anthropology, but that has been transferred into our communication studies as well. So that is a method in which we study in ethnography, and that is used very much in our understanding of, say, these campaigns, the media campaigns, and also another, which is now very common, which again comes from the language studies, linguistic studies, the critical discourse analysis, CDA, in other words, CDA, which is again, a very common method today in understanding communication researches. So what happens is, if we apply these methods, we understand better how these campaigns are organized. I'll talk about some of the campaign methods and really talk about, give you some examples of how these platforms have been used for campaigns, the power game, to understand the power game, and then try to also link it up with the data manipulation and the ethical questions. So if we take, say, 2024 US election and the 2024 Lok Sabha elections in India, we'll find that in the US, what has happened is the discussions or the debate has, from a marginal situation, it has actually been the battleground. It has become the mainstream. If we try to follow the social media, the digital media, how this is being used by whether it is the Republicans or the Democrats, they have been using it for for their. They use it not just for campaigning. But what has happened is they have also used for, which is a characteristic of American campaigning, they also use it for fundraising. We don't have this fundraising method used in the, say, election campaign in India, but that is also, the Americans mix up the fundraising aspect with the campaigning of their election campaigns. Now, if we see a little bit, I'll just touch upon, there has been an evolution of the different presidents using different digital media. In Reagan's time, there was no digital media, but he used the direct mailing system. And then in George Bush's time, he used this micro-targeting of the voters. Then Obama changed the entire thing, and because before Obama was fighting against the Republicans, he had to fight against in the Democrat itself against Hillary Clinton, and that there are lots of studies on just how Hillary Clinton's campaigning was much more, much rather weaker than Obama's. Obama was very specific how he used the YouTube, for example, how he used social media, and it was directly targeted at certain kinds of people. And what has happened, in fact, I personally feel that Obama's way, it was data-driven, definitely data-driven, and he had an army of volunteers to follow it up. So that army of volunteers is something which the BJP has imitated. They have, in fact, they have used 5 million WhatsApp groups. The famous IT group of BJP who have campaigned, they have 5 million WhatsApp groups, and they back up with all the other campaigns that is used. In fact, there gives an estimate that 288 crores was used by the BJP to use this campaign for the 2024 election. So this is the way. And what did Trump do? Trump was into, he used the data mining process of the voters' social behavior. And that there again a question, of ethics comes in, because we have, that has been established to some extent, that the Cambridge Analytica, that was one of these, surveys that was used to understand, say, consumer behavior, but that was used, the survey was used for understanding voters' inclinations also. So we see how, there is no, ethical barrier in using it, and in fact the company, the Cambridge Analytica, it was done in the Cambridge University lab, which was quickly shut down the moment it was revealed, but the damage was done. They have used it. So these are the way in which the digital media has been using, for political campaigns, whether it is in India or in the US. I have not used so much of, the use of AI. There has been, in fact, in the US, they have used predictive AI. That's a specific kind of AI, which has, the moment, Biden dropped out, that helped, Trump to take over almost 20% of through the predictive AI methods as his followers, as his voters. So the older method of photoshopping of pictures and thing was replaced by the new, AI, artificial intelligence grid. It's called the deepfake, which is, exactly, we found, those were very famous. Obama talking about something which was just contrary to what he has said. So these things were created by artificial intelligence. So the questions of ethics, questions of manipulation, these are very, 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 I should say, very, very common in our use of power play and data manipulation and ethics. I'll just quickly wind up, just talking about the West Bengal elections, this recently concluded West Bengal elections. How was, this particular Trinamool Congress has used, they emphasized on the, things like on the regional, dignity, Army Banglar Jodha. That was the idea, which was the campaign, which was countering the BJP's anti-Bengali narrative. They they used, actually, I think the controversial, the IPAC, they used 500 social media influencers to, 5,000 social media influencers to make this idea or emphasizes this idea of Bengali pride. That was one of the methods in which the campaign was fought. And then the most important was how they weaponized, the welfare schemes, Lokhit Bhandar, and the other. In the last moment, they introduced this the fund for the unemployed youth. So those are the things basically which the people, the Trinamool Congress had used, but didn't work, as we can see. What BJP had done, they again had used 50 lakh WhatsApp groups. 50 lakh WhatsApp groups. They have introduced Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, all this, and this was all backed up, controlled by now, a very, very efficient BJP IT cell, which was centralized in Delhi. And of course, their the people were living in for months together in Bengal itself, in Calcutta itself, organizing even at the ground level of, say, at the ground level of, at the block level even. So here, what their campaign was more on the illegal Bangladeshi infiltration, which to make the people, Bengalis, understand that there has been a demographic change in the state, and it's a cultural threat. So those are the things which they emphasized, which seems it has worked. And then they emphasized on the present TMC's corruption messages. And another thing which they did was 13,000 meetings were held by the Delhi people who came off and on, and also the local leaders and everything. 13,000, and they were all, recorded and shown through the online methods. So this is almost a warfare which is being fought out by the digital media, and all these involve a lot of ethical consideration. We need some research. There are plenty of research that is being done in the US regarding these, the method in which American elections are fought. But unfortunately, very little is studied on ground in India. But there should be, and we have, as I said, we have been using the CDA method or the nethnography for other means. This should be used also for understanding of this particular election campaigns. So I'll just 2 or 3 slides which I created, just giving the details. If they can show this, the next slide. Just giving the bare facts. Watching. কি এটা থেকে করতে হবে নাকি? হ্যাঁ? Oh. So here, they use, of course, I missed out on the Sir voter, the voter list part I missed out, but the rest is there. This is an additional, which we saw, the element of fish. I mean, the localized, how they have, the fear that it was, again, Bengali sentiment, that the BJP would take away the fish-eating habits of India. So this was something which was also part of the campaign. Here, it's what has been the organizational model. It was crowdsourced volunteer army, which TMC had, and BJP, they have the centralized IT cell, and the primary platforms which they use, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, and in BJP, it was WhatsApp, dominantly it was WhatsApp, the other Instagram Reels and everything. And the core digital narrative naturally was Bengali identity, welfare, they weaponized the welfare schemes, where in BJP it was what I saw, the infiltration threat, the demographic anxiety, anti-corruption, the women beneficiary, they emphasized on that, the emotional tone, the cultural tone that we are Bengalis, and there it was a threat to that Bengali culture which the BJP had, emphasized on. The virtual events, 15,000 person virtual meetings, and they were spread across the country. Yeah. In the US, I've already explained, these are, giving a structural format, how the Republicans have used the social media, and how the Democrats have used the social media. The content is Republicans, the long-form podcasts, whereas the Democrats has short-form and viral remixes. And the podcast, 14 major appearances, whereas it is limited within the Democrats. The tone, the ads were all there, but the deepfakes, use of deepfakes by, it was almost rampant today with Trump. We have studied in our traditional methods the yellow journalism, it is coming back in the form of deepfakes in Trump. Trump and deepfake to some extent was synonymous. So these are the things which we need to do a lot of research for future understanding of these power games. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. In this first part of our panel discussion, we have discussed the communication, mainly the political communication and the different communication tools which has been used by our political parties, not only in our state election, assembly election in India, across the world. But it is all about the privileged section, that means the political party, how they are using the digital platform for the power game, for the power play, and as well as how they are reshaping the whole narrative. But what about the inequalities? Or what about the people who are not in a position to get the access of the digital media, how they are using the data? So to discuss about this particular topic, the digital media, data, power, ethics, and as well as inequalities, we will switch to Dr. E. George. Dr. E. George, are you with us? Dr. George, are you with us? She has joined from Cape Town. She is associated with ICA Nigeria chapter. Dr. George, I would like to request PCR to connect Dr. George. Okay, I think due to this, some digital glitches, maybe right now she is not connected with us. So we will switch to our another eminent speaker, Professor Shubhit Dhar. Professor Dhar is from the background of language, and sir, actually, we would like to mention that this digital technology has changed the whole ecosystem of the communication. It has changed the relationship between man, human, and as well as the human data and as well as machine. So the post-human approach, what is your take on it? And as well as the digital communication and post-human approach, what should be and how can we actually use the post-human approach in a future research? So we would like to hear from you. Sir, please welcome.
Thank you very much, Jumur, for this very brief but very illuminating introduction to what I'm going to do today. Quite frankly, you see, I'm not going to go into, let's say, the nitty-gritty of doing communication work or communication theorization, because my objective is going to be much more theoretical, in a sense, perhaps philosophical. And the way I would start in is to indicate that we are really talking about interpretation. And today, you see, interpretation actually means hermeneutics. I'm sure most of you know that hermeneutics is a concept, is a word, a term, which really refers to the Greek god Hermes, who was a messenger. That is, you see, whatever the gods said were taken by Hermes and given to human beings. So you see, interpretation is everything. My essential point, first of all, is that without interpretation, you cannot have research. Because whenever you're researching anything whatsoever, what you read, particularly in the human sciences, let's say, you are actually indulging in activities of interpretation. And that is going to be my take on this. Now, the whole notion of hermeneutics, of interpretation, there are two aspects to it. One is the Western one, and you have philosophers like, say, Hans Georg Gadamer, who is talking about such things. But there's also an older Indian tradition, which really goes back about 1,000, 1,500 years back, to a school which is called the Sabara school, or actually the Shabara Mimamsa school. You know, it is at this time that the notion of interpretation is beginning to be investigated, noticed, and talked about. Later on, there was a development of this. For example, in around 700 CE, there was a scholar, a Sanskrit Pandit, if you want, called Kumarilal Bhatta, and he wrote a treatise on just this interpretation. And so you see, we have a vigorous tradition. But I'm not going into details about all this, because you see, my topic is much more centered on the whole notion of interpretation. Let me begin by indicating what I really mean by this. You see, my first point is that today, a new term is doing circles in certain aspects of intellectual theory, and that is, we now call it digital humanities. Digital hermeneutics. Digital hermeneutics is the study of the digital media as we have it today, how it works, why it works, and where it doesn't work, why doesn't it work. So this is a new field which is emerging today, and this is something I'm deeply interested in. To start off with, I think you see, one has to talk about the interpretational gap that exists between the human beings and digital machines. Now, for example, you see, the way in which human beings think, gain knowledge, and the way in which digital machines perform, there's a marked difference between these two. Like what? For instance, you see, we all know artificial intelligence. But have we come to a position in which we can talk about artificial wisdom? Perhaps not as yet. Maybe in the future, but not as just at this moment. You see, the whole issue is the way in which we think and the way in which, say, the new models, the artificial intelligence models, they think the gap between the two are narrowing, but there's still a significant difference. Why do I say this? I say this because the major concern today is how this gap between, say, the digital world and the human intellectual universe, how this gap is conflicting with each other. You see, the idea is that today we are coming to understand and appreciate that the human environment of intellect is being seriously challenged by these artificial methods and modes of intelligence. It's almost as if our human ability is being tested by the emergence of these new fields of thought, theory, and study. Not only that, you see, even more important, I think, is the notion that digital communications and research in digital communications is fast taking on a post-humanist stance. Why post-humanist? Because you see, we now recognize that humanity is not the end. And in a very major way, the new notions of post-humanism are coming in at this moment. And here, research in the digital media is becoming particularly important. Now, let me explain this a bit. The problem is actually compounded by the fact that big data and algorithmic machines, or generators if you want, produce an indifference towards human subjects. Such algorithmic systems operate at either a supra-individual or an infra-individual level. Let me explain this. You see, the point is nowadays algorithms dominate our lives. They influence you, they compel you, they persuade you, and we have to live our lives not in terms of what we decide, but in terms of what the algorithms have decided for us. In this context, you see, what happens is your choice, your ability to decide for yourself, these become severely limited and even hampered. You see, my point is that such algorithmic systems at one level are supra-individual, and at the same time, they're intra-individual. Supra, intra, obviously you see above and lower or below. That is, you see, these algorithms do not distinguish between the individual and the group. Nowadays, we talk in terms of systems which generate data in order to slot you into certain categories. That is, you see, based on your buying behavior, based by your social media activities, you are literally fitted into certain categories. This is, of course, a kind of a construct that the machines are making. And depending on the construct that the machine has made of you, based on its understanding of your consumerist behavior, material is funneled towards you, and you are expected to behave according to the way in which such material is being given to you. If you think of it in simple terms, what is all this about? This is, of course, a system by which the individual is losing his unique individuality and he's becoming part of a category, a larger category. For example, you see, nowadays, in certain experimental cases, there have been situations in which human beings who enter, say, a departmental store would, not known to them, be subject to surveillance. Because you see, the card that you're carrying in your hand or in your pocket may be read, and the people of the departmental stores would see that your profile would be reflected on the major screens of the people who are managing the store. That is, you see, you would become a kind of a target for their marketing strategy. For example, if you're a high spender and you have come to the store on other occasions, perhaps the store manager would discuss an assistant for you to help you in your shopping. And obviously, this person would carry your goods for you, help you make selections, and so on. So you have assisted shopping. Why? Because your consumer behavior has been recorded, has been analyzed, and you have been ascribed a particular place in a premeditated frame of reference. This is what AI is doing. This is what the digital means are doing today. The result is, of course, you see, you are being literally coerced, forced, persuaded to follow what the system is telling the store or the marketer. And your own individuality is getting severely compromised as a result of this. This is one aspect. Not only that, you see, one major aspect that I thought of, I think this is significant. That is, you see, if you think of it, you will notice that data modules and data models and human experiences are different. Why? Because you see, the human imagination operates through time. Let me explain this. You see, we tell each other stories. We tell stories to ourselves. When we try to make sense of anything, what do? We again narrativize our experience. And notice, this narrativizing is in terms of time. Something first happens, then something happens, then something happens, then something happens, so and so. So human experience is very much bound to the notion of temporality, time. On the other hand, with the digital mode, time becomes unimportant. Rather, space becomes important. Even when people or the digital modes are using time, even time is spatialized in the digital mode. So you see, the way in which we think, the way in which we react, and the way in which machines react are perhaps different at one point at one point particular place. In fact, you see, as I was saying, time is literally algorithmically spatialized. And so you see, spatialization becomes a notion of a horizon. And people, individuals are limited within those horizons. I was talking about categories in which you are placed as a potential customer or as a potential consumer. Once again, you see, this is a notion of you being placed not in terms of your innate instincts, but in terms of what you have done in the past. And so it is, once again, as Professor Dasgupta said, predictive AI which comes into operation. Not only that, you see, there's also the problem of what is now being called ontological. What is that? That is, you see, the notion that big data tells us everything, number one. And two, big data always tells the truth. That is, you see, big data is becoming so prominent in our lives today that we seldom ask whether big data's data is real, genuine, or not. Because you see, we sort of assume that whatever data tells you must be true. In other words, you see, the function in the past that we put on theology is now being transferred to big data. And so we have this notion of the theological understanding of big data in terms of certain finitudes, certain certitudes, certain evidences. Not only that, you see, this is true particularly in the field of research, because if you're a researcher in the field of the human sciences, you tend to assume that whatever data is telling you must be true. Of course, it may not be. But once again, you see, our assumptions in doing research are based on a collection of data. And our idea or our notion is that whatever the data is telling us has to be correct, has to be fundamentally unmistakable, and fundamentally finitely truth. The other problem is, of course, you see, when you're doing research in the social sciences, for example, and you use data, it will be very easy to forget that the data that you're using is not actually or was not actually used or created or generated for your use. For example, you see, data may have been collected for different purposes altogether. It could have been used for purposes of marketing. It may have been collected for the purpose of profiling, for surveillance, for medical mapping, etc. And we are tending, as you know, students of social sciences, literature, culture, we tend to use this data for our own purposes. And I think there is an ethical gap there. Because assuming that the data is real, not questioning where the data had originated and why it had originated can lead to wrong conclusions on our part as researchers ourselves. And in fact, you see, there is the issue of a notion of the scientization of data, because we tend to think that data must be science. It isn't, but we generally think that. Another aspect of ethics that becomes very important in any kind of an approach or use of data is, of course, the notion of indifference. What is indifference? You see, in a major way, it's happening all over the world. Human beings are becoming more and more indifferent to the surveillance around them. You know, all of us are being subjected to surveillance almost 24 hours a day. And any kind of an indulgence in either a mobile phone or a computer is also exposing you to surveillance. What is our instinct? We sort of accept this, forgetting the danger that we are actually entering a kind of a situation in which human beings are losing their independence to choose. You know, this is evident everywhere. For example, when you see a page which asks you to like something, once again, what are you doing? As soon as you click on the like, you are actually participating in that particular program or that particular media. This participation is important. Why? Because you see, if one thinks of, if one thinks of Michel Foucault, and if you talk about power, I'm afraid you have to talk about Michel Foucault at one point or the other. Now, Michel Foucault talked about the ritual of confession in the Middle Ages. You see, the idea was confession was not only a kind of a ritual of the display of power, but rather more importantly, confession by the subject was a acknowledgement of the power of the authority. That is, you see, when you confessed, you admitted that you are in the wrong and that there is a higher authority to whom you are submitting. I think the notion of confession is very interesting and very crucial to today's digital era. Like what? Every time you give permission, a program tells you, give permission to access your photos, your mails, your messages, and so on. And naturally, without thinking, you give the access. You see, as soon as you do that, what are you doing? You are losing control, number one. And not only are you losing control, you are actually encouraging, you're actually thinking, believing that the greater power of the organization, of the institution which is controlling this data is there, and you are actually submitting yourself to that particular mode. So you see, indifference is the human indifference to the invasion of privacy, the human acceptance of allowing data to invade our lives, ourselves, our individualities, our very existences. That is another ethical issue that I think any researcher in digital communication has to keep in mind. Next, there's also the question of privilege, which once again is very interesting. You see, digital world gives you certain privileges, say a Prime membership. What does that indicate? It really indicates that you are not being given a privilege, but a privilege to spend more. No more. Sure. Not only that, you see, the whole issue here is the issue of, let's say, the grayness of how data is controlling us, how we allow data to control ourselves, and the whole major question at the end of the day is that these are issues of ethics. Is it ethical? Why is it ethical? How can one be ethical in one's research? How open and transparent is the investigator? These are issues that one must think of. Thank you very much for listening patiently. I'll end over here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. We will quickly switch to Dr. E. George, I think. Hello, am I audible? Dr. George? Good evening, ma'am. Am I audible?
Hear me?
Ma'am, we have already started our panel. You have already joined. We talked about the the political communication in digital space. We have talked about,
Yes.
have discussed the post-human approach and man versus machine and interpretations. So, ma'am, can you please unmute yourself? Oh, okay. So we just want to know and we just want to discuss. We just want to know about your take on the inequalities in digital platform from the Nigerian point of view and as well as the West African point of view, that inequalities and how we can use the digital platform data and the power of data for the communication, for better communication. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gupta. It is my pleasure, distinguished colleagues, scholars, and friends from the Kolkata hub in India and the ICA India family. It is indeed my pleasure to be part of this hub-to-hub conversation on power, data, and ethics towards critical methodologies in digital communication research. Before I go ahead to the discussion, I want to just take a moment right now to thank Dr. Sanjay, the ICA India chapter chair, and all of the team behind the hub for inviting me, and not just me, all of the other attendees from the Port Harcourt hub of the ICA 26 who are online now on this Google Meet with you all in Kolkata. Thank you very much, ICA India and the Kolkata hub, for having us join in this hub-to-hub event. So, this topic which we talk about is very interesting to me, not just theoretically, because we have listened to the distinguished professors who have spoken here earlier on, but also to the realities of life in the global south, especially in Nigeria, where we come from, and across Western Africa. A lot of people live their lives online. They do so much as organize as communities and do business, receive information about their health, about national, local, and global crisis online. So the topic of digital communication research is far more engaging to real life than people might actually think it is. Digital communication is how we live now. It is how we belong now. It is how a lot of persons make meaning of their lives now. Not just to the people who can go on these digital platforms, but also to the people who can take the information, call it data, call it news, about people in rural communities in Nigeria who are farming or who are fishing or who are in conflict-related camps, settlements for people who have been displaced. Information about them is going on digital spaces. So the issue of data, the issue of power, the issue of what researchers should do to ensure that none of the groups that are in these different communities, in these different countries that are not advanced digitally will be left behind. Powerful global companies own data structure. Pronounce my name Ekaite or know my community here where I come from. But when I use the internet, these algorithms affect the things that I do, the things that I see, and the things that I am able to project if I wanted to project it. So, if they are not designed for our everyday realities, what then should African users expect when it comes to data collected, stored, analyzed, and monetized based on their lived experiences? The people visible online, are they the people that are affected by the studies that we carry out? Are they the people that are affected or will benefit from the researches that we make? This is where the question of methodologies become important, not just to researchers, but to the issue, human issues that are represented in communication research. So we cannot simply collect news, we cannot simply collect tweets, we cannot simply collect Facebook posts, we cannot simply collect WhatsApp messages and say they are data without thinking, who are the people that are represented here? Who are the people that are excluded and why are they excluded? The people who are represented, what about them? Have they consented to being exposed? What about them? Do they want us to highlight? What about their lived experiences? Have we not even picked up on the data that we are collecting? What about harm? How do we expose the issues, the people, the communities, the regions, the races, and the region and the ethnic groups that we represent in our communication research data? So what harms have we exposed them to? And what harms can we protect them from? So these sorts of issues are what I think about when I was preparing to make this presentation on the topic of power, data, and ethics. Who is the custodian of the standards of ethics that communications researchers are going to abide by in collecting data, in putting humanity into the issues, the questions that our researchers will answer? This, therefore, is a huge responsibility. It is a huge responsibility, and it's also a burden that researchers have to carry out, in spite of sometimes being unable to control the digital platforms, the digital infrastructure, maybe even not having access to the digital infrastructures that are required to carry out this research ethically and as humanly possible for the communications research to extend its reach. Sometimes we need to pay attention to the language that we are representing in our research. What are the jokes? What are the codes that we are projecting or leaving behind in our research, in the data that we are collecting, or in the data that we are giving more attention to than the others? When we talk about Nigeria and West Africa, these issues are what I believe that communication researchers, when talking about the issue of power and data, need to give extra attention to. The issues that border around sustainable development. The issues that border about effecting social change in our society that will enable our society, individuals, and the different segments of our society to develop and develop at a rate that allows us to compete globally. So it is the data that will affect our public health. It is the data that will affect political systems, will allow young people to participate in political discussions and conversations that concern them. It is the data that will give attention to gendered abuse, so that the young woman in my community who has no access to the internet, but who has access to me as a researcher and has narrated or shared her experiences with physical and psychological abuse in an intimate partner relationship, will be represented in the data that I am collecting for a communications research project. What about conflict? What about displacement? What about terrorism that is tearing our communities apart? A meme that I picked from the internet can highlight the issues that are important to ending these scourges in our society, on our country, and on our continent, more than a formal political statement from a politician might be able to do. So data is not just material for research. Data is people. Data is context. Data is culture. Data is language. Data, therefore, is power. And data possesses consequences. This is why the topic that we are discussing here, this hub event, is crucial to all of us, especially in the global south, where we have needs of development that must be met with the cooperation and with the active participation of communications research that give attention, serious attention to sustainable development challenges and prospects for growth that very much also exists in our country, in our continent, and in the global south in general. How we do communication research will help us to count what is visible, ask questions that challenge assumptions, question the algorithms and data that we have, include the languages and cultures and the context that we belong to, increase our visibility, but not just increasing our visibility, because visibility is not always an indication that we are a part of a system. We may be there, but we may be powerless. So the visibility will come with us also being represented fully, in the full breadth of what being represented means. Our vulnerabilities will be there, but our experiences that are unique to us will also be there. As Nigerians, as West Africans, as scholars from the global south, representing with data the issues of our countries and of our regions in the communications research about digital communication. So we must be critical enough to question the powers that be, the algorithms that define what appears when we are searching for data, for posts, for tweets, for WhatsApp messages, and then the places where our issues, our concerns are excluded. What do we do to go look for the exclusions and then reflect it in our communications research? When we do that, then we are reflecting our society, we are protecting our people, we are questioning power, and we are taking the power that we also as communication researchers need to possess for us to effect enough changes in our society that we expect to see. Our research is not just theoretical, it is impactful. It deals with humans and it can affect humans, it can have human consequences. So when we think about this responsibility, the voices we amplify in the data we gather, the data we decide to use, and those we decide to ignore, the people who we protect, especially vulnerable ones and marginalized members of our community, like women, like children, like people in conflict-ridden societies, like poor, the economically poor, who may not have the affordances of digital communication that we are able to have as communications researchers. We will protect them. And then we will recognize our indigenous knowledge. We will recognize our cultural assets that not just enriches our research, but also puts us at the center of power and allows us to control the ethics of digital communication for the sustainable development of our societies. Thank you so much. And once again, ICA India and Kolkata Hub for the opportunity.
Very well said, Dr. George. Very well said that you have raised a very pertinent few, very important and pertinent questions that how we can use our data. Basically, what is data? Data should represent our ethnicity, our language, and as well as the people who are not are not in a position to access the digital media, how they can actually use this data, these very, very important questions, and how we can like channelize our research to use this data. Very well said. Fantastic deliberations, ma'am. So right now, I just want to switch to our last eminent speaker, Dr. Debanjan Banerjee. And sir, I would like to welcome you. And the sir will talk about the power dynamics of big data.
Very good evening, the sagacious panelist on dais and respected madam from Cape Town, respected moderator, and the distinguished audience. Let me start with a famous quote of Stephen Zweig. Where is the wisdom that we have lost in knowledge? And where is the knowledge that we have lost in information? Indeed, we have lost wisdom, knowledge because of information. Information nowadays becomes overload of information. But there is no other way. At this point of time, we all become heavy media consumers. We used to consume media more than 10 hours. We are no more a moderate media consumer or a low media consumer. We are stick to media, especially solely and exclusively the digital media, almost more than 10 hours. Sometimes it can be 12 hours. The today's topic, my sagacious speakers already spoke in length and breadth. I'm the last speaker. So I'm coming to the core. Power, data, and ethics in digital communication research. Power, data, and ethics in digital communication research represent a critical intersection where researchers navigate the exploitation of massive data sets, algorithm biases, and the protection of vulnerable subjects. It demands a rigorous evaluation of informed consent, digital privacy, and the systematic imbalances of power between data extractors and users. This I am talking from one of my research articles recently published specifically on this topic. The rapid expansion of social media and digital platforms right now I mentioned has fundamentally transformed communication research drastically. To ensure responsible inquiry, researchers must navigate several interconnected pillars. I would like to mention one by one. First is the power dynamics of big data. Big data plays a pivotal role at this crucial juncture. First, the asymmetry of power. Large tech platforms possess disproportionate power over the generation, privileged demographics. Failing to account for this skew reproduces systematic marginalization and unequal distribution of the burdens and benefits of research. Now, two things are very important. One is informed consent, which is not taken while doing such kind of digital communication research. And the second is privacy. These two things are compromised often while this kind of research is on. What is informed consent? Obtaining genuine, active consent is increasingly difficult in digital spaces. That is a realistic problem and challenge, where users often skip through extensive privacy terms or where the boundary between public and private data is blurred. This is the first obstacle or the first impediments. The second is the privacy, which is often being compromised while this kind of research is being executed. Simply removing names from a data set is rarely enough in the digital age. De-anonymization techniques and cross-referencing capabilities mean that anonymized data can often be traced back to specific individuals or vulnerable groups. Now, the next is the bias amplification. Bias amplification. Machine learning systems and AI-driven methodologies rely on historical data that is often rife with social prejudices. If researchers rely on biased data, their work can reinforce harmful stereotypes and discriminatory effects, and which is a very significant problem at this point of time, where the researchers rely on biased data, and this biased data is based on his or her own biasness. Next comes the transparency. Researchers have a responsibility to utilize transparent methodologies. The black box nature of proprietary algorithms limits verifiability and challenges the objectivity of communication research. Now, the next problem we often face while doing this kind of digital communication research is the framework for the responsible research. To counter or overcome these ethical and power disparities, digital communication research increasingly adopts frameworks like the 5 C's. Like we often know in communication, there are 5 C's of communication. Here also, there are 5 C's of data analytics. Number 1 is consent. You need to take the consent. Your research has to have the clarity. It has to have the consistency, control vis-a-vis transparency, and consequences or harm, just to harm the mitigation. I repeat, these 5 C's are extremely essential of data analytics. One is the consent, the clarity, the consistency, the control, and the consequences. Additionally, the framework of data ethics of power asks researchers to prioritize human well-being and democratic discourse over mere technological utility. Moreover, in digital communication research, power, data, and ethics are closely connected because researchers study how digital platforms shape communication, influence behavior, and use information. Now, let me explain in nutshell the 3 keywords of today's panel: the power, the data, the ethics. Let me start with the power. What exactly power in digital communication research? Power refers to who controls communication. Who is the controlling authority of communication? The information flows and the digital infrastructures. The key questions, or you can tell the frequently asked questions, the FAQs, pertaining to the importance of power in digital communication research are: how do governments, corporations, and platforms influence public opinion? Who controls access to information online? And how do algorithms amplify or suppress voices? Researchers further examine the role of large technology companies such as Meta, Google, and X in shaping discourse through recommendation systems, moderation policies, and data collection. So in communication, there is another theory called the agenda setting theory. This agenda has been prepared by these large corporations. Now, let me tell about the different powers which are playing very important roles in this digital communication research. One is the platform power. Social media companies influence visibility and engagement. Then comes the surveillance power. User behavior is monitored through digital traces. Then comes the political power. Online communication can affect elections, which my previous speaker, Dr. Dasgupta, specifically mentioned in the US elections, even in the Indian elections, when WhatsApps randomly and rampantly used with different groups and proliferating one particular political party's ideologies. And try to understand, there are hundreds and thousands of groups. If you tell a lie for 100 times, it can be a truth if it is spread without fact checking. So it often happens in the American elections over the years, and it is happening in the Indian election nowadays. The last one is the algorithm power. Automated systems determine what users see. Now the next comes is the data in digital communication research, the next part. Data is central because digital communication leaves measurable traces. Data, there are some common sources pertaining to data. First is the social media posts, comments, likes, and shares. Next comes the search behavior and browsing pattern. Browsing pattern play a very important role. Next is coming messaging and interaction networks. Then comes the digital platform analytics. And the last is, but not the least, user-generated content like images, videos, and hashtags. Researchers further use methods from data science, communication studies, and computational social science to analyze the public opinion, the misinformation and disinformation, the biggest ever malady. Even it is much more detrimental than pandemic, this misinformation and disinformation. Then comes the online communities, digital activism, and audience engagement. However, big data creates further challenges like data may be biased or incomplete, platform access is often restricted, algorithms influence what data becomes visible. Now the last part is ethics in digital communication research, which is almost in oblivion at this point of time. Nobody bothers about ethics, but still we the researchers, with our communication teachers, we discuss in seminars, different symposiums, in lecture sessions about this ethics, but I don't know in reality how much it is being preached. It is preached but not practiced. But definitely we need to discuss on this ethical part. First is the privacy and consent. Even publicly available posts may contain sensitive information. Researchers ask, did users knowingly consent to their data being analyzed? Should private or semi-private communications be studied? Next comes another very important, data protection. Researchers must protect participants from harm by this data protection, which is basically securing data sets, avoiding exposure of personal information. Next comes the bias and fairness. Algorithms and data sets may reinforce inequalities based on gender, class, race, language, or geography, which is very much omnipresent in our subcontinent, especially if we consider India is a case study, when this bias is inflicted on gender, on class, on race, on language, or geography. Next comes the harm and manipulation. Studies involving online experiments, behavioral tracking, or misinformation exposure raise concerns about manipulation and psychological harm. The next ethical part is called the transparency and accountability. Researchers are expected and supposed to explain how data was collected, how you are collecting the data, how algorithms or models were used, what limitations and biases exist. So these are the three very specific parts of today's discussion: power, data, and ethics in digital communication research. I conclude with my speech is the relationship between these three, which is also playing a very, very important role. These three ideas, on the other hand, are interconnected: power, data, and ethics. Powerful institutions collect and control data. Data enables influence over communication and behavior, and ethics determines what should or should not be done with that power and data. I repeat, very, very important. Powerful institutions collect and control data. Data enables influence over communication and behavior. Ethics determines what should or should not be done with that power and data. Finally, digital communication research studies who has power, how data is produced and used, and what ethical responsibilities arise in digitally mediated communication system. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. In this particular panel, we have discussed few points. First, we have discussed the digital platform and the political communication. The second speaker has beautifully said about the changing relationship, man, machine, technology, and post-human perspective. Dr. George has mentioned about the digital communication, inequalities, data, how we can, and representations of the ethnic group and as well as the unheard communities. And our last speakers, Dr. Banerjee, is actually discussed about the big data dynamics and ethical perspective. By this note, we are wrapping up this panel. This panel is the last panel of this day, the first day of our ICA Regional Hub conference. Thank you, Dr. George, and thank you all the participants who have joined online with us, and as well as all the participants right now who are here in the auditorium. The participants who are here, the speakers and all the distinguished guests, I am requesting them to join us in the high tea. We have arranged it in second floor. Thank you.